I wasn't there to impress anyone that Tuesday morning. I just needed antibiotics for my sister's rescue dog and maybe some advice about his limp. The appointment was already scheduled, the paperwork filled out, everything routine. But when the receptionist saw me walk in wearing my old hiking boots and paint-stained jeans, carrying a beat-up carrier with a three-legged mutt inside, her smile disappeared. When the veterinary techs nearby noticed the dog's condition, they started whispering. No one asked about his history. No one asked what I'd already done to help him. But someone did notice from the back office. Dr. Martinez, the head veterinarian, didn't ask for my credentials or question my story. She asked one simple question, and when she heard my answer, the entire clinic went silent. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Want to know what she recognized and why everything changed in that moment? The morning fog still clung to the hills around Marin County when I pulled into the parking lot of Sunset Animal Hospital. The clinic sat nestled between a coffee shop and a yoga studio, all glass windows and modern angles that screamed expensive even from the outside. This wasn't the kind of place I'd normally choose, but my sister Carmen had insisted. She'd done her research, read every review online, and decided that Dr. Elena Martinez was the best veterinarian in Northern California. Carmen always did her homework, probably a habit left over from her days as a prosecutor before she moved up here to rescue animals full-time. The parking lot was already half full despite the early hour. Mercedes and BMWs lined up next to pristine SUVs, the kind of vehicles that had never seen a day of actual work. I pulled my dusty Honda Civic into a spot between a Tesla and a Range Rover, feeling like I was crashing a country club meeting. Through the carrier's mesh window, Bruno whimpered softly. His anxiety always spiked in new places, probably because he'd seen too many veterinary clinics in his short life, most of them not for good reasons. Bruno wasn't what anyone would call a beautiful dog. 3 legs, mismatched ears, scars across his muzzle from whatever had happened before Carmen found him chained to a fence post outside Fresno. His left hind leg had been amputated 6 months ago, infected so badly the emergency vet said it was either lose the leg or lose the dog. Carmen had mortgaged her house to pay for the surgery, then called me crying because she couldn't handle watching him struggle through recovery alone. That's how I ended up spending my retirement driving back and forth between my place in Sacramento and her rescue operation in Petaluma. 34 years in the military teaches you a lot of things, but the most important lesson is that you don't abandon your people when they need you. Carmen was family, and Bruno had become family by extension, even if he did drool on my car seats and require more medication than some field hospitals I'd run. The automatic doors of Sunset Animal Hospital whooshed open with the kind of smooth efficiency that money buys. The lobby looked more like a luxury hotel than a medical facility. Polished marble floors, leather seating areas around a stone fireplace, and soft classical music drifting from hidden speakers. Fresh flowers on every surface, the kind of arrangements that probably cost more than most people's grocery budgets. Even the air smelled expensive, like lavender and success. Behind the curved reception desk, a young woman with perfectly straightened blonde hair and manicured nails looked up from her computer screen. Her smile was practiced and professional until she registered my appearance. Work boots, faded jeans with paint stains from helping Carmen repair her kennels, and a flannel shirt that had seen better decades. The smile flickered, became more cautious, like she was trying to figure out if I was lost or possibly dangerous. "Good morning," she said with carefully modulated enthusiasm. "How can we help you today?" "I have an appointment for Bruno Rodriguez," I said, setting the carrier on the counter. 10:30 with Dr. Martinez. She tapped her keyboard with nails that clicked like tiny hammers. "Bruno Rodriguez, yes, here it is. And you're Carmen Rodriguez?" "I'm Isabella Rodriguez, Carmen's sister. She's out of town, so I'm handling the appointment." The receptionist's eyes shifted to the carrier, where Bruno's face was visible through the mesh. His tongue lolled out the side of his mouth, and his remaining legs were splayed in the awkward way three-legged dogs learn to balance. He looked like exactly what he was, a survivor who'd been through hell and came out the other side, damaged but breathing. "Oh," she said, and something in her tone changed. Not hostile, but definitely cooler. "Is this a follow-up for his amputation?" "Actually, it's for a possible infection in his right front paw. He's been limping more than usual, and there's some swelling." She nodded and handed me a clipboard thick with forms. "Please fill these out completely. Insurance information, medical history, and emergency contacts. Dr. Martinez will be with you shortly." The waiting area was occupied by the kind of clientele you'd expect in a place like this. A woman in yoga pants and diamond earrings held a pristine white Persian cat in a carrier that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Next to her, an elderly man in a cashmere sweater kept a perfectly groomed golden retriever at his feet, the dog's coat shining like it had been professionally buffed. Everyone looked like they belonged in a magazine spread about successful pet ownership. I found a chair in the corner and set Bruno's carrier on the floor beside me. He settled down with a soft grunt, the way he did when he was trying to conserve energy. Through the mesh, I could see him watching the other animals with the wariness of someone who'd learned not to trust too quickly. Smart dog, even if his circumstances had been rough. The forms were extensive, asking for everything from Bruno's vaccination history to detailed descriptions of his daily routine. I filled them out methodically, drawing on 6 months of careful observation and Carmen's meticulous record-keeping. She documented everything about her rescues, partly for legal reasons and partly because she genuinely cared about giving each animal the best possible care. Bruno's file was 3 inches thick, full of veterinary reports, medication logs, and behavioral notes. "Excuse me," a voice said from beside my chair. I looked up to see a veterinary technician in purple scrubs, her name tag reading Sarah. She was young, probably fresh out of school, with the kind of earnest expression that suggested she took her job very seriously. Behind her stood another tech, older, with salt and pepper hair, and the confident bearing of someone who'd been working with animals for decades. "I'm sorry to bother you," Sarah continued, "but I couldn't help noticing your dog's condition. Has he been seen by a veterinary orthopedist about his mobility issues?" "He's been seen by several specialists," I replied. "The amputation was done by Dr. Williams at UC Davis 6 months ago." The older tech, whose name tag read Jennifer, leaned closer to peer through the carrier mesh. "It's just that 3-legged dogs often develop compensatory injuries in their remaining limbs. Without proper physical therapy and ongoing monitoring, they can end up with chronic pain issues." There was something in her tone that rubbed me the wrong way, a subtle implication that I wasn't providing adequate care. "He's been receiving physical therapy twice a week and has regular checkups with his primary vet in Petaluma." "Oh, that's good," Sarah said, but she exchanged a look with Jennifer that suggested they weren't entirely convinced. "It's just that we see a lot of rescue dogs whose owners mean well but don't always understand the complexity of their medical needs." The words hung in the air like an accusation wrapped in professional courtesy. I felt my jaw tighten, the way it did when someone questioned my competence without bothering to get the facts first. 20 years as a field surgeon had taught me to recognize that particular brand of condescension, the kind that assumed incompetence based on appearances rather than evidence. "I understand the complexity just fine," I said, keeping my voice level. "That's why he's here for evaluation of a possible secondary infection, not because I don't know how to care for a disabled animal." Jennifer's smile became more strained. "Of course, I didn't mean to imply otherwise. It's just that special needs animals require a level of commitment that not everyone is prepared for. We've seen too many cases where well-meaning people take on more than they can handle." Before I could respond, they'd moved away, but their voices carried across the waiting room with the kind of volume that suggested they wanted to be overheard. Professional gossip disguised as clinical concern, the sort of behavior that gave medical facilities bad reputations. "Did you see the condition of that carrier?" Sarah was saying to the receptionist. "Scratched plastic, old blankets. That dog probably hasn't seen consistent veterinary care in months." "And did you notice how she was dressed?" the receptionist added. "Not exactly the demographic that usually brings animals here for specialized treatment." Jennifer nodded sagely. "I'm betting they'll want to do everything on the cheap. We'll probably get pushback on any diagnostic recommendations. These rescue situations always end up being more about the owner's guilt than the animal's welfare." I stared down at Bruno, who was watching me with those dark, intelligent eyes that had seen too much but still trusted too easily. His tail gave a tentative wag when he caught my gaze, and something inside my chest tightened. This dog had survived abandonment, abuse, infection, and amputation surgery. He'd learned to walk again, to play again, to believe that humans might actually take care of him instead of hurting him. And now he was being judged by people who'd never spent a night in a field hospital, never had to make life-or-death medical decisions with limited resources and no backup. The whispers continued behind me, a soundtrack of professional judgment wrapped in concern for animal welfare. I'd heard similar conversations in military hospitals when civilian contractors brought wounded animals to base clinics. The same assumptions, the same casual dismissal of anyone who didn't fit the expected profile of proper pet ownership. It didn't matter that some of the best animal care I'd ever witnessed came from soldiers who'd found strays in combat zones and moved heaven and earth to get them proper treatment. "Miss Rodriguez?" A different voice, warmer and more professional. I turned to see a woman in a white coat approaching with a genuine smile. Dr. Elena Martinez was shorter than I'd expected, with silver threading through dark hair and the kind of presence that suggested both competence and compassion. She carried herself like someone who'd earned respect the hard way, and her eyes went immediately to Bruno rather than to me. "Good morning, Dr. Martinez," I said, standing. "Thank you for fitting us into your schedule." "Carmen spoke very highly of you when she called to set this up," she said, crouching down to peer into the carrier. "And this must be the famous Bruno. May I?" I unzipped the carrier, and Bruno emerged slowly, taking his time to assess the situation. His 3 legs worked together with the fluid motion that spoke of months of careful rehabilitation, and when Dr. Martinez extended her hand for him to sniff, his tail wagged with genuine enthusiasm. "He's beautiful," she said simply, running gentle hands over his coat. "Carmen told me about his journey. UC Davis did excellent work on the amputation site." "Dr. Williams was fantastic," I agreed, "but we're concerned about this new issue with his right front paw." Dr. Martinez was already examining the affected area with the kind of thoroughness that spoke of genuine expertise. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking for heat, swelling, and range of motion while Bruno stood patiently. She wasn't performing for an audience or making assumptions based on appearances. She was simply doing her job with the kind of professional competence that had become increasingly rare in my experience. "There's definitely some swelling here," she said, gently manipulating the paw. "Given his history and the increased weight bearing on his remaining limbs, I'd like to run some diagnostics to rule out infection or stress fractures." Before I could respond, Jennifer appeared beside us with a printed estimate. "Dr. Martinez, I've prepared the cost breakdown for the recommended diagnostics. X-rays, blood work, and bacterial cultures will run approximately $800, not including any additional treatments that might be needed." She handed the paper to me with the kind of meaningful look that suggested she expected sticker shock. $800 was a significant amount of money, but it wasn't unreasonable for the level of diagnostic work Bruno needed. I'd seen military veterinary bills that made this look like pocket change, and Carmen had already authorized whatever treatment was necessary. "That sounds appropriate," I said, signing the consent forms without hesitation. "When can we get started?" Jennifer's eyebrows rose slightly, and I caught Sarah watching from across the room with obvious surprise.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
They'd been expecting pushback, negotiations, or requests for less expensive alternatives. Instead, they got someone who understood that quality medical care costs money and that Bruno's well-being was worth every penny. "We can start immediately," Dr. Martinez said, and there was something in her expression that suggested she'd also heard the earlier commentary. "Jennifer, please prepare the imaging suite. Sarah, I'll need blood work supplies and bacterial culture media." As the techs hurried away to prepare for the diagnostics, Dr. Martinez lingered for a moment, watching Bruno with the kind of professional assessment that missed nothing. He'd settled into his three-legged sit with the patience of an animal who'd learned that medical procedures were part of life now, not something to be feared. "You know," she said quietly, "I've been practicing veterinary medicine for 15 years, and I can usually tell within the first few minutes how well an animal has been cared for. Bruno shows every sign of excellent ongoing medical management. His weight is perfect, his coat is healthy, his behavior suggests he's not in chronic pain, and his mobility is remarkable for his level of amputation." I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. Carmen has been incredibly dedicated to his recovery. She's documented everything, followed every protocol, made sure he has everything he needs. "And you've been helping with that care?" "As much as I can. I have some experience with rehabilitation medicine." Dr. Martinez nodded, but before she could ask follow-up questions, Jennifer returned with the imaging equipment cart. The morning routine resumed, but something had shifted in the atmosphere. The earlier whispers had stopped, replaced by the kind of focused professionalism that suggested everyone was remembering why they'd chosen to work in animal medicine in the first place. Bruno submitted to the X-ray procedure with the stoic patience of a patient who'd been through worse. The blood draw took longer than usual because his veins had been compromised by previous medical procedures, but he never flinched or tried to pull away. He'd learned to trust medical professionals, probably because the people caring for him had earned that trust through consistent, gentle treatment. While we waited for the diagnostic results, Dr. Martinez led us to a private examination room decorated with landscape photographs of Northern California. The morning sun streamed through large windows, and Bruno settled on the examination table with the resignation of someone who'd spent too many hours in similar rooms. "The X-rays should be ready in about 20 minutes, Dr. Martinez said, settling into her chair with Bruno's file. "While we wait, I'd like to know more about his daily routine. Carmen mentioned that you've been instrumental in his rehabilitation process." I found myself describing the careful protocols we developed over the past 6 months. The physical therapy exercises designed to strengthen his remaining limbs without overworking them. The dietary adjustments to maintain optimal weight while supporting muscle development. The environmental modifications Carmen had made to her property to ensure Bruno could navigate safely. The behavioral work to help him regain confidence and trust. Dr. Martinez listened with the kind of attention that suggested genuine interest rather than professional obligation. She asked intelligent questions about specific techniques and nodded approvingly when I described some of the more innovative adaptations we'd implemented. Her questions became increasingly detailed, focusing on aspects of rehabilitation medicine that went beyond basic veterinary care. "You mentioned experience with rehabilitation medicine," she said eventually. "May I ask what kind of background you have?" Before I could answer, Sarah knocked on the door and entered with a tablet displaying Bruno's X-ray results. The images were clear and detailed, showing the bone structure of his remaining limbs with the kind of precision that modern veterinary medicine could achieve. "No stress fractures visible," Dr. Martinez said. "Bone density looks excellent. The issue appears to be soft tissue related, probably inflammation in the muscle groups that have adapted to compensate for the missing limb." She turned the tablet so I could see the images, pointing out areas of interest with the kind of thoroughness that suggested she took patient education seriously. The bones looked strong and properly aligned, which spoke well for the rehabilitation work we'd been doing. "The blood work shows some elevated inflammatory markers, but nothing that suggests systemic infection," she continued. "I think we're looking at overuse inflammation rather than bacterial infection. Treatable with anti-inflammatory medication and modified activity levels." It was good news, the kind of diagnosis that meant Bruno would be fine with proper management. As Dr. Martinez explained the treatment plan, I found myself relaxing for the first time since entering the clinic. This was what competent veterinary care looked like, thorough and professional without being condescending or judgmental. "Dr. Rodriguez," she said, and I looked up in surprise. "I'm sorry, did I get that wrong? The appointment was listed under Rodriguez, and I assumed." "Isabella Rodriguez," I confirmed, "but just Isabella is fine." "Isabella, then. I have to ask, and please forgive me if this sounds presumptuous, but your knowledge of rehabilitation protocols is quite extensive. Do you work in human medicine?" The question hung in the air like an invitation to reveal more than I'd planned. Through the examination room, I could see the parking lot where my dusty Honda sat between luxury vehicles like a refugee from a different economic bracket. In the distance, the hills of Marin County rolled away toward the Pacific, beautiful and expensive, and nothing like the places I'd spent most of my career. "I used to," I said finally. Dr. Martinez waited, the kind of patient silence that invited elaboration without demanding it. Bruno had fallen asleep on the examination table, his breathing deep and even, finally relaxed now that the medical procedures were finished. His trust in the situation was complete, based on months of learning that these people would take care of him rather than hurt him. "What kind of medicine?" she asked gently.
Trauma surgery, mostly. Field medicine. Military hospitals. The words came out more easily than I'd expected. Most civilians didn't know what to do with that information, how to process the idea that the woman in paint-stained jeans had once held life and death in her hands on a regular basis. But Dr. Martinez just nodded, as if it made perfect sense. "That explains the rehabilitation expertise," she said, "and probably why Bruno's recovery has been so successful. Military medicine has always been ahead of the curve on trauma rehabilitation." Before I could respond, Jennifer appeared in the doorway again. But this time her expression was different. Instead of the earlier skepticism, she looked uncertain, like someone who just learned information that didn't match their assumptions. "Dr. Martinez," she said hesitantly, "I was updating Bruno's file in our system, and when I entered Isabella Rodriguez as the emergency contact, something came up that I think you should see." She held out a tablet with what looked like a database search result. Dr. Martinez took it, and her eyes widened slightly as she read whatever was displayed on the screen. She looked at me, then back at the tablet, then at me again. "Is there something wrong?" I asked. "Jennifer," Dr. Martinez said slowly, never taking her eyes off me, "would you please ask Sarah to join us? And please make sure we won't be disturbed for the next few minutes." The tech nodded and disappeared down the hallway, moving with the kind of urgency that suggested something significant was happening. Through the examination room walls, I could hear the normal sounds of a busy veterinary clinic, but something in the atmosphere had changed. Dr. Martinez set the tablet on the counter and turned to face me directly. "General Rodriguez," she said quietly, "I believe we need to have a different conversation." The seconds stretched between us like a held breath. Dr. Martinez's eyes never left mine, and I could see her processing information, connecting dots that I hadn't realized were visible. Bruno stirred on the examination table, sensing the shift in energy without understanding its source. His tail gave a tentative wag, the way it did when he wasn't sure if he should be worried or hopeful. "I think there's been some confusion," I said carefully. "I'm not sure what your database is showing, but I'm just Isabella Rodriguez, retired. I help my sister with her animal rescue when I can." Dr. Martinez picked up the tablet again, her fingers scrolling through whatever information had appeared on the screen. Her expression was thoughtful, professional, but there was something underneath it that I couldn't quite read. Recognition, maybe, or uncertainty about how to proceed. "The veterinary database has connections to several government registries," she said slowly. "Insurance verification, professional licensing, emergency contact protocols. When Jennifer entered your name as Bruno's authorized caregiver, it triggered a cross-reference that pulled up some interesting information." Sarah appeared in the doorway with the hesitant expression of someone who'd been told something was important but wasn't sure what role they were supposed to play. Dr. Martinez gestured for her to enter and close the door behind her. The examination room suddenly felt smaller, more intimate, like a space where significant conversations happened. "Sarah," Dr. Martinez said, "I need you to upgrade Mr. Bruno's file to VIP status immediately. Full priority treatment, no waiting, no questions about authorization or payment. Whatever he needs, whenever he needs it." The young technician's eyebrows rose in surprise. VIP status was reserved for the clinic's most important clients, the ones whose names appeared on donor lists and charity fundraising committees. Dogs whose owners wrote five-figure checks to support the clinic's pro bono work. Animals belonging to local celebrities or politicians who brought publicity and prestige to the practice. "Of course, Dr. Martinez," Sarah said, though her confusion was obvious. "Should I also update the billing to reflect—" "No changes to billing," Dr. Martinez interrupted. "Mrs. Rodriguez will handle payment as discussed, but I want it noted in his file that any future appointments should be handled with complete discretion and full priority status." Sarah nodded and made notes on her tablet, but I could see her stealing glances at me, trying to reconcile the woman in paint-stained jeans with whatever had triggered this sudden elevation in status. After she finished updating Bruno's file, Dr. Martinez dismissed her with instructions to ensure our privacy wasn't disturbed. Once we were alone again, Dr. Martinez turned back to me with an expression that seemed to balance curiosity with respect. She wasn't pushing for information, but she wasn't pretending nothing had happened either. The tablet sat between us on the counter like evidence of something I hadn't intended to reveal. "I spent 4 years as a contract veterinarian at Bagram Air Base," she said finally, 2015 to 2019. "I treated everything from bomb detection dogs to therapy animals to the strays that soldiers adopted as unit mascots. It was some of the most rewarding work I've ever done." The words hit me like an unexpected wave of memory.
Bagram had been one of my regular rotations during those years, flying in to provide surgical support when the base hospital was overwhelmed or when cases required specialized trauma expertise. I'd worked with several veterinarians during those deployments, but faces and names blurred together after so many years and so many bases. "It's a different world over there," I said carefully. "Military veterinary work requires a special kind of dedication. The soldiers who brought animals to my clinic were some of the most caring people I've ever met," Dr. Martinez continued. "They'd move heaven and earth to get medical treatment for a stray dog or an injured cat. I learned more about compassion and dedication from watching those interactions than I did in 4 years of veterinarian school." Bruno had settled back into sleep, his breathing steady and even. The morning sun had shifted, casting different shadows across the examination room, and I could hear the normal sounds of clinic operations beyond the closed door. But inside this room, time seemed suspended while Dr. Martinez and I navigated around information that neither of us was entirely sure how to address. "The database entry that came up," she said eventually, "it shows a cross-reference to Department of Defense medical personnel records. Specifically, it lists you as an authorized emergency contact for military working dog medical treatment protocols. That's a very specialized designation." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the way I always did when my military background unexpectedly surfaced in civilian situations. Most of the time, I could pass as just another retiree, someone who'd served her time and moved on to a quiet life helping her sister rescue animals. But occasionally, the past reached out and grabbed me, usually when I least expected it. "I worked with military working dog units sometimes," I admitted, "when their animals needed surgical treatment that went beyond basic veterinary care. Trauma surgery translates across species more than people realize." "The authorization level in your file suggests more than occasional consultation," Dr. Martinez said gently. "It indicates permanent advisory status on special operations medical protocols. That's not something they give to just any surgeon, even one with extensive trauma experience." Before I could respond, Jennifer knocked on the door with the kind of urgency that suggested something was happening in the main clinic. Dr. Martinez called for her to enter, and the older technician slipped inside with an expression that mixed confusion with embarrassment. "Dr. Martinez," she said, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation developing in the main waiting area. Mrs. Henderson is demanding to know why her appointment was moved to accommodate a walk-in, and she's asking some very pointed questions about our VIP protocols." Through the examination room door, I could hear raised voices from the front of the clinic.
Mrs. Henderson, presumably the woman with the pristine Persian cat, was expressing her displeasure with the kind of volume and indignation that suggested she wasn't used to being told to wait for anything. "I've been bringing Duchess here for 3 years," came the voice from the waiting area. "I schedule months in advance, I pay premium rates, and now you're telling me that some woman with a 3-legged mutt gets priority treatment? I want to speak to Dr. Martinez immediately." Dr. Martinez sighed and stood up, the kind of weary movement that suggested this wasn't the first time she dealt with entitled clients questioning her clinical decisions. "Jennifer, please tell Mrs. Henderson that I'll speak with her personally in a few minutes, and please make sure that no one discusses the details of any patient's treatment or status with other clients." After Jennifer left to manage the situation in the waiting area, Dr. Martinez turned back to me with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry about this. Unfortunately, some of our clients have very strong opinions about how they think the clinic should operate." "You don't need to rearrange your schedule for us," I said. "Bruno's treatment is straightforward, and we can wait our turn like everyone else." "Actually," Dr. Martinez said, "that's not entirely accurate. Based on what I'm seeing in your file cross-reference, treating Bruno isn't just routine veterinary care. It's an extension of military medical protocols that deserve a level of respect and priority that goes beyond normal client services." The voices from the waiting area were getting louder, and I could hear Mrs. Henderson demanding explanations about clinic policies and threatening to take her business elsewhere. Other clients were beginning to murmur among themselves, probably wondering what kind of disruption was affecting their appointments. "This is exactly why I don't usually mention my background," I said. "It creates more problems than it solves. People either don't understand it or they make assumptions about what it means." Dr. Martinez gathered up Bruno's file and the tablet with my database information, her movements decisive in the way that suggested she'd made some kind of decision. "Would you be comfortable if I address this situation directly? I think it might help clear up some of the confusion that's developing." "I'd prefer to just finish Bruno's treatment and leave quietly," I said. "We don't need any special consideration." "I understand that," she said, "but I think the confusion has already gotten to a point where leaving quietly might not be possible. Mrs. Henderson is demanding explanations, and some of my staff are wondering why I changed protocols mid-morning. Sometimes the best way to handle a situation is to address it head-on with complete transparency." Before I could object, she'd opened the examination room door and was leading Bruno and me back toward the main clinic area. The waiting room had transformed from the quiet elegance of earlier into something resembling a town hall meeting where everyone had grievances to air. Mrs. Henderson stood near the reception desk with her cat carrier in one hand and her cell phone in the other, apparently in the middle of either recording the interaction or calling someone to complain. The other clients had arranged themselves into a loose semicircle, close enough to hear whatever drama was unfolding, but far enough away to maintain plausible deniability about eavesdropping. "Dr. Martinez," Mrs. Henderson announced as we entered, "I demand an explanation for this completely unprofessional disruption to your appointment schedule. I've been waiting for 45 minutes while you provide special treatment to a walk-in client who clearly doesn't belong in a clinic of this caliber." The words hung in the air like an accusation, and I felt every person in the waiting room turn to look at me with the kind of assessment that reduced people to their surface appearance.
Paint-stained jeans, work boots, a 3-legged rescue dog, and an attitude that didn't apologize for any of it. In their world, I probably didn't belong, and Mrs. Henderson was just saying what everyone else was thinking. Dr. Martinez stepped forward with the kind of calm authority that I'd seen in military commanders who knew how to handle situations that were spiraling toward chaos. She didn't raise her voice or make theatrical gestures, just positioned herself where everyone could see and hear her clearly. "Mrs. Henderson," she said, "I apologize for any inconvenience to your appointment schedule. However, I need to clarify some misconceptions about what happened here this morning." She turned to address the entire waiting room, making eye contact with each client like she was briefing a medical team before a complex procedure. "This clinic serves all animals that need medical care, regardless of their appearance or their owner's economic circumstances. We don't provide better treatment to expensive purebreds than we do to rescue animals, and we don't judge the quality of pet care based on how someone dresses or what kind of car they drive. That's not the issue, Mrs. Henderson interrupted. The issue is that you changed your entire protocol to accommodate someone who walked in off the street without an appointment. Actually, Dr. Martinez said, Mrs. Rodriguez did have an appointment. What changed was my recognition of who she is and what she's contributed to animal welfare, particularly in circumstances that most of us will never face. I felt my stomach tighten as every person in the waiting room focused their attention on me with renewed curiosity. This was exactly the kind of attention I'd spent 8 years learning to avoid, the moment when my past became public information whether I wanted it to or not. Isabella Rodriguez, Dr. Martinez continued, is a retired military surgeon who spent over 2 decades providing trauma medical care in combat zones. She's treated everything from battlefield injuries to complex reconstructive surgery under conditions that would challenge any medical professional. Her experience with rehabilitation medicine is part of why Bruno's recovery from his amputation has been so successful. The waiting room had gone completely quiet, the kind of silence that happens when people realize they've been making assumptions based on incomplete information. Mrs. Henderson's indignant expression had shifted to something more uncertain, like she was trying to figure out how to process this new information. More specifically, Dr. Martinez said, Dr. Rodriguez served as senior trauma surgeon for multiple special operations deployments, including medical advisory roles with military working dog units. The database cross-reference that triggered our VIP protocols shows her as an authorized consultant on advanced combat trauma treatment for both human and animal patients. Jennifer and Sarah had appeared from the back areas of the clinic, drawn by the unusual gathering in the waiting room. Both technicians looked like they were seeing me for the first time, trying to reconcile the woman they judged earlier with the professional credentials Dr. Martinez was describing. The reason Bruno received priority treatment, Dr. Martinez continued, isn't because I was showing favoritism to a walk-in client. It's because I recognized that we were treating an animal whose medical care represents an extension of military medical protocols that deserve our highest level of respect and attention. Mrs. Henderson set down her cat carrier and put away her cell phone, the fight going out of her posture like air leaving a deflated balloon. The other clients in the waiting room seemed to be reassessing everything they'd observed that morning, probably realizing that their assumptions about the woman with the 3-legged rescue dog had been completely wrong. I didn't know, Mrs. Henderson said finally, her voice much quieter than it had been moments earlier. I apologize if I misunderstood the situation. There's no need to apologize for advocating for your pet's care, Dr. Martinez said diplomatically. That's exactly what good pet owners should do. I just want everyone to understand that every animal that comes through our doors receives the best care we can provide, regardless of circumstances. The tension in the waiting room began to dissipate as clients returned to their seats and the normal rhythm of clinic operations resumed. But I could feel the shift in how people were looking at me. The way their expressions had changed from dismissive judgment to curious respect. It wasn't comfortable, but it was different. Dr. Martinez led Bruno and me back toward the treatment area, away from the curious stares and whispered conversations that would probably continue for the rest of the morning. In the hallway between the waiting room and the examination rooms, she stopped and turned to face me with an expression that seemed to balance apology with determination. "I'm sorry if that was more public than you would have preferred," she said, "but I felt like the situation needed to be addressed directly rather than allowed to continue building into something worse." "I understand why you did it," I said, though part of me was still processing the sudden exposure of information I'd spent years keeping private. It's just that I've gotten used to avoiding these kinds of explanations. "Can I ask why? I mean, your service record is something to be proud of, isn't it?" The question hung between us, like an invitation to reveal more than I usually shared with anyone, civilian or otherwise. Bruno had settled at my feet, leaning against my leg in the way he did when he sensed I was uncomfortable but wanted to offer whatever comfort a 3-legged dog could provide. "It's complicated," I said finally. "Military service means different things to different people, and it's not always a conversation I want to have with strangers, especially when they've already decided what kind of person I am based on how I look or what I drive." Dr. Martinez nodded with the kind of understanding that suggested she'd heard similar sentiments from other veterans who'd learned to navigate civilian assumptions about military service. The veterinarians I worked with at Bagram said similar things. They felt like their military experience was either completely misunderstood or romanticized in ways that didn't match reality. Exactly. People either think you're a hero who can do no wrong, or they think you're damaged goods who can't function in normal society. Neither assumption leaves much room for just being a regular person who happened to serve in the military for a while. But you weren't just serving in the military for a while, Dr. Martinez said gently. According to your database file, you were senior surgical staff for some very specialized operations. That's not typical military service. Before I could respond, Sarah appeared in the hallway with a clipboard and an expression that mixed professional efficiency with newfound respect. She approached us with the kind of deference that suggested she was still processing the revelation about my background. "Dr. Martinez," she said, "I have Bruno's discharge instructions ready, and I've updated his file with the VIP status protocols you requested."
Is there anything else you need for their visit today? Actually, Sarah, Dr. Martinez said, I'd like you to make sure that Bruno's file includes a note about specialized rehabilitation protocols. If he needs any follow-up care or if Carmen wants to discuss advanced treatment options, I want them to be seen immediately without any scheduling delays. Sarah nodded and made additional notes on her clipboard, then looked at me with the kind of curiosity that suggested she wanted to ask questions but wasn't sure if it would be appropriate. "Ma'am, I just want to say that I'm sorry about earlier. We see a lot of animals come through here, and sometimes we make assumptions without getting the whole story. You were looking out for Bruno's welfare," I said. "That's what good veterinary professionals should do. No apology necessary." After Sarah left to finalize the discharge paperwork, Dr. Martinez and I stood in the hallway while Bruno explored the new smells and sounds around him. The clinic had returned to its normal rhythm, but something fundamental had changed in how the staff was interacting with us. The earlier skepticism had been replaced by a kind of professional respect that felt both welcome and uncomfortable. "There's something else I wanted to discuss with you," Dr. Martinez said, "but it can wait until you're ready to hear it. I don't want to overwhelm you with more information than you're prepared to handle today." "What kind of something else?" "It's about Bruno, actually, and about some opportunities that might be available for animals like him, given the specialized care he's received and the expertise involved in his rehabilitation." The words carried implications that I couldn't quite decode, suggestions of possibilities that went beyond routine veterinary follow-up care. Bruno looked up at me with those dark, trusting eyes, probably sensing that another conversation about his future was happening around him without his input. "What kind of opportunities?" Dr. Martinez glanced around the hallway to ensure our privacy, then leaned closer with the conspiratorial air of someone sharing classified information. "There are programs, both military and civilian, that use specially trained animals for therapy work with wounded veterans. Animals who have overcome their own trauma and disability can sometimes connect with human patients in ways that traditional therapy approaches can't achieve." The idea hung in the air between us, like a bridge connecting Bruno's difficult past to a potentially meaningful future. A three-legged rescue dog who'd learned to trust again, working with combat veterans who were struggling with their own recovery processes. It was the kind of symmetry that military planners loved and that actually sometimes worked in practice. "Bruno would be good at that kind of work," I said slowly. "He has the temperament for it, and he's certainly been through enough to understand what recovery looks like." That's exactly what I was thinking, but it would require specialized training and certification, probably 6 to 12 months of intensive work with professional animal therapists. Not everyone is in a position to make that kind of commitment. Before I could respond, Jennifer appeared in the hallway with Bruno's medication and a printed care instruction sheet. She approached us with the same newfound respect that Sarah had shown, but there was something else in her expression, a kind of curiosity that suggested she had questions beyond Bruno's medical treatment. "Everything's ready for discharge," she said, handing me the medication bottle and instruction sheet. "Dr. Martinez, should I schedule their follow-up appointment for next week or wait to hear from them?" "Let's schedule it for next week," Dr. Martinez said. "And Jennifer, please make sure it's noted that any concerns about Bruno's care should be addressed immediately, regardless of normal appointment availability."
After Jennifer left to update the scheduling system, Dr. Martinez turned back to me with an expression that seemed to balance professional interest with personal curiosity. The morning had transformed from routine veterinary care into something much more complex, and I could see her still processing the implications of my unexpected background. "I hope you'll consider what I mentioned about the therapy animal programs," she said, "but more than that, I hope you'll stay in touch regardless. It's not often I meet someone who understands both sides of medical care the way you obviously do." The invitation hung between us like an offer of something I hadn't realized I was missing: professional respect from someone who understood the complexities of trauma medicine, recognition of expertise that I'd spent years downplaying, and the possibility of meaningful work that could benefit both Bruno and the veterans who might need what he could offer. "I'll think about it," I said, and meant it. "Thank you for everything today, for Bruno's treatment, for handling the situation with your other clients, and for recognizing something that I didn't expect anyone to see." As we prepared to leave, I realized that the morning had fundamentally changed how I thought about moving through the world as a civilian. For 8 years, I'd worked to blend in, to avoid drawing attention to my military background, to pass as just another retiree helping her sister with animal rescue work. But maybe there was value in being seen for who I actually was, rather than hiding behind the comfortable anonymity of paint-stained jeans and a beat-up Honda Civic. The California sun had climbed higher by the time we reached the parking lot, burning off the morning fog and revealing the kind of clear, bright day that made Marin County look like a postcard advertisement for expensive living. Bruno walked beside me with the measured gait of someone who'd learned to navigate the world on 3 legs, his medication secured in my jacket pocket and his follow-up appointment scheduled for the following week. My Honda Civic sat exactly where I'd left it, still dusty and out of place between the luxury vehicles, but somehow the contrast didn't bother me the way it had earlier. The morning had shifted something fundamental in how I understood my place in civilian spaces, and I found myself less concerned with blending in and more interested in simply being present as myself. "Isabella, wait a moment." I turned to see Dr. Martinez approaching across the parking lot, moving with the purposeful stride of someone who'd made a decision about something important. She'd traded her white coat for a casual blazer, and I realized her workday was probably ending as mine was just beginning. Bruno's tail wagged in recognition, and he settled into his patient sit while she reached us. "I wanted to catch you before you left," she said. "There's something I didn't mention earlier about those therapy animal programs I brought up, something that might change how you think about the opportunity." The morning heat was building, and I could feel perspiration beginning to gather under my jacket. Around us, the parking lot hummed with the quiet activity of a successful medical practice, clients coming and going, staff members heading to lunch breaks, the normal rhythm of professional life continuing without pause. What kind of something? Dr. Martinez glanced around the parking lot, then gestured toward a shaded area near the building entrance where we could talk without interruption. "The program I was thinking of isn't just any therapy animal initiative. It's specifically designed for military working dogs and their handlers who've been injured or traumatized in combat situations." We settled on a bench positioned to take advantage of the morning shade, Bruno immediately claiming the cool concrete at our feet. The clinic's landscaping was precisely maintained, the kind of careful attention to detail that spoke of significant investment in creating an environment that promoted healing and calm. The program operates out of a facility about an hour north of here, near Sebastopol.
It's run by a retired Navy doctor named Patricia Henley, who started it after her own experiences with combat trauma recovery. They work with animals who've overcome significant challenges, pairing them with veterans who are struggling with similar issues. The name Patricia Henley triggered a distant memory, something from my years rotating through different military medical facilities. A physician who'd gained recognition for innovative approaches to trauma recovery, someone who'd published papers on alternative therapy methods that military medicine had been slow to embrace. "I know that name," I said. "She developed protocols for treating PTSD using animal-assisted therapy. Her work was controversial because it went against traditional psychiatric approaches." "That's her. She's been running this program for about 5 years now, and the results have been remarkable. Veterans who haven't responded to conventional therapy sometimes make breakthrough progress when they're working with animals who understand survival and recovery from a visceral level." A delivery truck pulled into the parking lot, its diesel engine adding to the ambient noise of midday traffic. The driver began unloading boxes of medical supplies, the routine logistics that kept places like this functioning smoothly. Normal Tuesday activities continuing around us while we discussed possibilities that could reshape both Bruno's future and my own. What would Bruno's role be in something like that? Animals like Bruno, who've experienced significant trauma and made successful recoveries, become mentors in a way, Dr. Martinez explained. They work alongside veterans who are dealing with physical disabilities, emotional trauma, or both. There's something powerful about a three-legged dog who's learned to run and play and trust again, working with a veteran who's lost a limb or struggling with invisible wounds. The idea had an elegant symmetry to it, the kind of practical psychology that made sense from both medical and human perspectives. Bruno had indeed learned to navigate the world with resilience and optimism despite his physical challenges, and his capacity for trust despite his traumatic history was remarkable even by animal standards. The training would be intensive, Dr. Martinez continued, 6 months minimum, possibly longer depending on how quickly Bruno adapts to the specific requirements. It would mean regular trips to Sebastopol, working with professional animal therapists, and eventually participating in sessions with actual veterans. I watched Bruno investigate the interesting smells around the bench, his tail wagging as he discovered evidence of previous dogs who'd visited this spot. He approached new experiences with curiosity rather than fear, probably because he'd learned that most new things in his current life turned out to be positive rather than threatening. The program also provides opportunities for the animal's primary caregivers to get involved, Dr. Martinez said, and something in her tone suggested this was the part she'd been building toward. They need people with medical backgrounds who understand both trauma recovery and animal behavior, people who can work with the veterinary staff and the human therapists to develop integrated treatment approaches. The invitation hung in the air like an offered pathway into something I hadn't known I was looking for. For 8 years, I'd been helping Carmen with her rescue operation, providing medical expertise when animals needed surgical care or complex rehabilitation. But this would be different, using my training in a structured program designed to heal both animals and humans simultaneously. You're suggesting I get involved beyond just Bruno's participation? I'm suggesting that your background makes you uniquely qualified to contribute to this kind of work in ways that go far beyond typical pet owner involvement. Combat trauma surgery, rehabilitation medicine, experience with military working dog protocols. Patricia Henley has been looking for someone with exactly your combination of skills. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text message from Carmen, asking how Bruno's appointment had gone. The simple question reminded me that this morning had been about routine veterinary care for my sister's rescue dog, not about major life decisions or career opportunities. But somehow, the morning had evolved into something much more complex. "Can I ask you something personal?" Dr. Martinez said. "What have you been doing with your time since retiring from military service, beyond helping Carmen with her rescue work?" The question touched something I'd been avoiding thinking about too directly. Retirement had been a goal for so long, something to work toward and plan for, that I'd never spent much time considering what would come after achieving it. The first few years had been occupied with settling into civilian life, learning to navigate a world without military structure and purpose. But lately, the days had begun to feel longer, less meaningful, like I was marking time rather than living with intention. "Not enough," I said honestly. "I volunteer with Carmen's rescues, I do some consulting work for veterinary clinics when they need surgical expertise, I read a lot of books, but none of it feels like the kind of work that makes a real difference." "Military medicine spoils you for civilian satisfaction," Dr. Martinez said. "When you've spent years making life-or-death decisions under extreme conditions, civilian medical practice can feel trivial by comparison." The observation hit closer to home than I was comfortable admitting. The intensity of combat medicine had created an addiction to high-stakes problem-solving that civilian life rarely provided. Most days now felt like an extended vacation that I'd never asked for and wasn't sure how to enjoy. "This therapy animal program," I said slowly, "what would my actual role be if I got involved?" Dr. Martinez's expression brightened with the enthusiasm of someone discussing work they genuinely cared about. Patricia Henley has been trying to expand a program to include more sophisticated medical support. Right now, they have excellent animal trainers and good human therapists, but they lack someone who understands the intersection of trauma medicine and animal behavior at an advanced level. A maintenance worker emerged from the clinic building and began watering the landscaped areas around the entrance, the spray creating momentary rainbows in the bright sunlight. The normal rhythm of keeping a medical facility operational continued around us, but our conversation had created a pocket of possibility that felt separate from routine concerns. The ideal candidate would be someone who could work with the veterinary staff to optimize animal health and training protocols, consult with human therapists on trauma recovery approaches, and potentially develop new treatment methodologies that integrate both sides of the healing process. It sounded like the kind of meaningful work I'd been unconsciously searching for without knowing how to define it. Complex problem solving that could make a real difference in people's lives, using skills that had been gathering dust in civilian retirement, contributing to something larger than individual patient care. How would you know Patricia Henley would be interested in someone like me? Dr. Martinez smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd been waiting for exactly that question. Because I called her while you were getting Bruno's discharge paperwork ready. I described your background and asked if she'd be interested in meeting with you. She wants to set up a conversation as soon as possible. The revelation that she'd already initiated contact on my behalf was both flattering and slightly overwhelming. It suggested a level of confidence in my potential that I wasn't sure I shared, and it moved the possibility from theoretical discussion to concrete next steps faster than I'd been prepared for. You called her based on one morning's interaction? I called her based on 30 years of veterinary experience that's taught me to recognize when someone has both the technical expertise and the personal qualities needed for difficult work. What I observed this morning wasn't just professional competence. It was someone who understands healing at a fundamental level, both for animals and humans.
Bruno had finished his investigation of the immediate area and returned to settle at my feet, leaning against my leg with the comfortable weight of an animal who'd learned to trust completely. His presence was grounding, a reminder that some of the best therapeutic relationships happened naturally rather than through formal programs. Patricia Henley wants to meet with both of us, Dr. Martinez continued, you and Bruno together. She believes that the most effective therapy-animal partnerships happen when the animal's primary caregiver is actively involved in the training and treatment process. The morning had transformed from a routine veterinary visit into a potential life change, and I found myself both excited and terrified by the possibilities. After 8 years of drift and gradual civilian adjustment, the opportunity to engage in meaningful work again felt like waking up from a long sleep. When would this meeting happen? As soon as you're ready for it. Patricia's schedule is flexible, and she's eager enough to meet with you that she'd probably drive down here if necessary. But I think you'd benefit from seeing the facility and meeting some of the animals and veterans who are already participating in the program. A couple emerged from the clinic with a small dog in a carrier, their conversation focused on post-surgical care instructions. Normal veterinary concerns being handled with routine professionalism, the kind of everyday medical practice that kept animals healthy and owners satisfied. But what Dr. Martinez was describing sounded like veterinary medicine elevated to something closer to mission work. There's something else you should know, Dr. Martinez said, and her tone shifted to something more personal. Patricia Henley served 3 tours in Afghanistan as a Navy flight surgeon. She understands combat medicine from the inside, and she specifically looks for program participants who have that shared foundation of experience. The information created another layer of connection to the opportunity, the recognition that this wouldn't involve explaining military culture to civilians or translating combat experience into language that non-veterans could understand. It would mean working with people who'd been there, who understood both the intensity of military medicine and the challenges of transitioning those skills to civilian applications. How soon would Bruno need to start training if we decided to pursue this? The next training cohort begins in 6 weeks. It's a small group, usually 4 to 6 animals with their primary caregivers, working intensively with the professional staff for the initial certification period. After that, ongoing training continues while the teams begin working with veteran clients. 6 weeks felt simultaneously like plenty of time to prepare and no time at all to make such a significant decision. But Bruno seemed ready for new challenges, and I was increasingly aware that I needed something more substantial to occupy my energy and expertise than occasional consulting work and volunteer rescue assistance. What happens if we meet with Patricia Henley and decide it's not a good fit? Then you've spent an afternoon learning about innovative approaches to trauma recovery and meeting some remarkable animals and people. No commitment, no obligation, just information gathering to help you make an informed decision. The low-pressure approach was appealing, offering exploration without forcing immediate commitment to something I wasn't entirely sure and understood yet. Bruno looked up at me with those dark, trusting eyes, probably sensing that another conversation about his future was happening, but confident that whatever decisions were made would be in his best interest. "I think we should meet with her," I said finally. "Bruno deserves the chance to contribute something meaningful with his recovery, and I'd like to understand better what this program actually involves." Dr. Martinez's smile was immediate and genuine, the expression of someone who'd been hoping for exactly that response. "I'll call Patricia this afternoon and set something up for later this week. She's going to be thrilled to meet both of you." As we stood to leave, Dr. Martinez handed me her business card with her personal cell phone number written on the back. "I want you to call me if you have any questions or concerns about this opportunity. And, regardless of what you decide about the therapy program, I hope they'll keep bringing Bruno here for his veterinary care. We'd consider it an honor to continue treating him." The drive back to Carmen's property gave me time to process the morning's unexpected developments. Bruno rode in the passenger seat with his head out the window, enjoying the wind and the constantly changing scenery of rural Marin County. His contentment was infectious, a reminder that sometimes the best approach to uncertainty was simply to remain open to whatever possibilities might emerge. Carmen was waiting in her driveway when we arrived, surrounded by 3 other rescue dogs who greeted our return with enthusiastic tail wagging and careful sniffing of Bruno to assess his medical adventure. She took one look at my expression and knew immediately that something significant had happened beyond routine veterinary care. "Tell me everything," she said, settling onto her porch steps while the dogs arranged themselves around us in the comfortable hierarchy they'd established over months of shared living. I described the morning's events, from the initial skepticism of the veterinary staff through Dr. Martinez's recognition of my military background to the unexpected opportunity with the therapy animal program. Carmen listened with the focused attention she brought to all animal-related discussions, asking clarifying questions and nodding approvingly at Bruno's excellent behavior throughout the medical procedures. "This sounds perfect for both of you," she said when I'd finished the full account. "Bruno has been looking for more purpose in his life, and you've been looking for more meaning in yours. Maybe this morning was about more than just treating a swollen paw." The afternoon sun was beginning to cast longer shadows across Carmen's property, highlighting the careful improvements she'd made to accommodate animals with various physical challenges. Ramps instead of stairs, non-slip surfaces in wet areas, and comfortable resting spots positioned to take advantage of both sun and shade throughout the day. It was a place designed around understanding what injured animals needed to thrive. "Are you nervous about getting back into medical work?" Carmen asked. "Terrified," I admitted. "It's been 8 years since I practiced any kind of medicine regularly. What if I've lost my edge? What if I can't handle the intensity of working with trauma patients again? What if you discover that you're exactly what this program needs and that this work is exactly what you've been missing without knowing it?" The alternative perspective was both encouraging and challenging, forcing me to consider that my fears about returning to medical practice might be less important than the potential benefits of meaningful work. Bruno had settled at my feet with the patient contentment of an animal whose medical needs had been properly addressed and whose future held interesting possibilities. "When do you meet with Patricia Henley?" "Dr. Martinez is calling her this afternoon to schedule something for later this week. I'm both excited and terrified about the conversation." Carmen reached down to scratch Bruno behind his ears, and his tail thumped against the porch steps with the rhythmic contentment of an animal who'd learned to appreciate simple pleasures. "Whatever you decide, I'm proud of you for being willing to consider it. It takes courage to step back into the kind of work that demands everything you have to give." As the afternoon moved toward evening, I found myself thinking about the morning's transformation from routine veterinary care to potential life change. The woman who'd walked into Sunset Animal Hospital wearing paint-stained jeans and expecting nothing more than antibiotics for a rescue dog's swollen paw had walked out with an invitation to meaningful work and a renewed sense of professional identity. The phone call with Patricia Henley was scheduled for Thursday afternoon, followed by a visit to the facility in Sebastopol the following Monday, if our initial conversation went well. 6 days to prepare for discussions that could reshape both Bruno's future and my own. 6 days to consider whether I was ready to step back into the intensity and purpose of medical work that mattered. But as I watched Bruno settle into his evening routine, moving with the confident grace of an animal who'd learned to thrive despite significant challenges, I realized that readiness might be less important than willingness to try. When do you meet with Patricia Henley? Dr. Martinez is calling her this afternoon to schedule something for later this week. I'm both excited and terrified about the conversation. Carmen reached down to scratch Bruno behind his ears, and his tail thumped against the porch steps with the rhythmic contentment of an animal who'd learned to appreciate simple pleasures. Whatever you decide, I'm proud of you for being willing to consider it. It takes courage to step back into the kind of work that demands everything you have to give. As the afternoon moved toward evening, I found myself thinking about the morning's transformation from routine veterinary care to potential life change. The woman who'd walked into Sunset Animal Hospital wearing paint-stained jeans and expecting nothing more than antibiotics for a rescue dog's swollen paw had walked out with an invitation to meaningful work and a renewed sense of professional identity. The phone call with Patricia Henley was scheduled for Thursday afternoon, followed by a visit to the facility in Sebastopol the following Monday, if our initial conversation went well. 6 days to prepare for discussions that could reshape both Bruno's future and my own. 6 days to consider whether I was ready to step back into the intensity and purpose of medical work that mattered. But as I watched Bruno settle into his evening routine, moving with the confident grace of an animal who'd learned to thrive despite significant challenges, I realized that readiness might be less important than willingness to try. When do you meet with Patricia Henley? Dr. Martinez is calling her this afternoon to schedule something for later this week. I'm both excited and terrified about the conversation. Carmen reached down to scratch Bruno behind his ears, and his tail thumped against the porch steps with the rhythmic contentment of an animal who'd learned to appreciate simple pleasures. Whatever you decide, I'm proud of you for being willing to consider it. It takes courage to step back into the kind of work that demands everything you have to give. As the afternoon moved toward evening, I found myself thinking about the morning's transformation from routine veterinary care to potential life change. The woman who'd walked into Sunset Animal Hospital wearing paint-stained jeans and expecting nothing more than antibiotics for a rescue dog's swollen paw had walked out with an invitation to meaningful work and a renewed sense of professional identity. The phone call with Patricia Henley was scheduled for Thursday afternoon, followed by a visit to the facility in Sebastopol the following Monday, if our initial conversation went well. 6 days to prepare for discussions that could reshape both Bruno's future and my own. But as I watched Bruno settle into his evening routine, moving with the confident grace of an animal who'd learned to thrive despite
Sometimes the best opportunities emerged not from careful planning, but from remaining open to possibilities that appeared unexpectedly in the course of ordinary days. The morning had begun with a simple veterinary appointment and evolved into something much more complex and promising. Perhaps that was how the best changes happened, not through dramatic decisions, but through small steps toward meaningful work, one conversation at a time, one opportunity at a time, one day at a time. Thursday's phone call with Patricia Henley lasted 2 hours and covered territory I hadn't expected to revisit after 8 years of civilian life. Her voice carried the familiar cadence of military medical professionals, direct and precise without wasting words on unnecessary pleasantries. Within the first 10 minutes, she'd assessed my background with the efficiency of someone who knew exactly what questions would reveal the information she needed. "Dr. Rodriguez," she said, and hearing my rank used naturally after so many years felt like putting on a uniform that still fit perfectly. "Elena Martinez tells me you have experience with combat trauma rehabilitation protocols. Can you walk me through your approach to treating complex limb injuries and field conditions?" The questions that followed were technical, specific, and designed to determine whether my medical expertise had remained sharp during retirement. We discussed surgical techniques for traumatic amputations, rehabilitation timelines for major limb reconstruction, and the psychological factors that influenced recovery outcomes in both human and animal patients. The reason I'm asking these particular questions, Patricia explained, is that our program deals with veterans who've experienced similar traumas to what Bruno went through. Physical injuries combined with psychological trauma, learning to navigate the world with permanent disabilities, rebuilding trust after experiencing life-threatening situations. Monday's visit to the facility near Sebastopol exceeded every expectation I'd formed during our phone conversation. The program operated from a renovated ranch complex that had been specifically designed to accommodate both animals and humans with mobility challenges. Wide pathways, accessible buildings, and outdoor spaces that encouraged interaction between species while maintaining safety for everyone involved. Patricia Henley met us at the main building entrance, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and the kind of steady presence that inspired confidence in both animals and humans. She moved with the purposeful efficiency of someone who'd spent decades making medical decisions under pressure, and her first interaction was with Bruno rather than with me. "So this is the famous three-legged survivor," she said, crouching down to let Bruno approach at his own pace. He responded to her immediately, tail wagging and body language relaxed in the way that indicated he'd found another human who understands animals at a fundamental level. The facility tour revealed the scope and sophistication of the program's approach to animal-assisted therapy. Training areas equipped with obstacles to build confidence in both animals and humans, therapy rooms configured for individual and group sessions, and living areas where participating animals could decompress between working sessions. "We currently have 12 animals in various stages of training," Patricia explained as we walked through the main therapy building. "Dogs, horses, even a few cats who've proven remarkably effective with certain types of trauma cases. But Bruno would be our first triple amputee, which opens up possibilities for working with veterans who've experienced similar injuries." In the main therapy room, I watched a golden retriever named Max work with a veteran named James, who'd lost his right leg in an IED explosion in Iraq. The dog had been trained to provide physical support during mobility exercises, but the real magic happened in the quiet moments between formal therapy activities, when man and animal simply existed together in comfortable understanding. "Max was hit by a car 2 years ago and lost his left front leg," Patricia said quietly as we observed the session. "His recovery process mirrors what James went through after his injury. They understand each other's challenges in ways that human therapists and animal trainers can appreciate but never fully replicate." The afternoon included meetings with the facility's veterinary staff, animal behavior specialists, and human therapists who would work with Bruno and I if we decided to join the program. Each conversation revealed additional layers of complexity and sophistication in their approach to trauma recovery, but also confirmed that my medical background would contribute significantly to their existing capabilities. "What we're missing," Patricia said as we concluded the formal tour, "is someone who understands combat medicine well enough to help us develop protocols for more complex cases. Veterans with multiple injuries, complicated psychological presentations, situations that require both advanced medical knowledge and deep understanding of military culture." The training program that Bruno and I entered 6 weeks later proved to be more intensive and emotionally challenging than anything I'd experienced since my final deployment. The other participants included a retired Marine explosives expert and his German Shepherd, who'd both survived the same roadside bomb, a Navy corpsman working with a rescued pit bull who'd been used in dogfighting, and an Army medic whose border collie had been trained to detect seizures. Bruno adapted to the structured training environment with remarkable enthusiasm, as if he'd been waiting his entire recovery for the opportunity to contribute something meaningful to other creatures' healing processes. His natural empathy and hard-earned resilience made him an ideal candidate for therapy work, and his progress through the certification requirements exceeded everyone's expectations. My own adaptation to returning to medical work proved more complex. The first time I participated in a therapy session with a veteran struggling with traumatic amputation recovery, muscle memory kicked in with an intensity that surprised me. The clinical assessment skills, the ability to read patient responses and adjust treatment approaches accordingly, the confidence that came from years of high-stakes medical decision-making, all of it remained intact despite 8 years of civilian dormancy. "You found your calling again," Patricia observed after watching me work with a particularly challenging case involving a veteran with multiple limb injuries and severe PPSC. "This is what you were meant to do with your retirement." The program's approach to trauma recovery integrated traditional therapy methods with innovative techniques that leveraged the unique bond between humans and animals who'd experienced similar challenges. Bruno became particularly effective working with veterans who'd lost limbs, his own adaptation to three-legged mobility serving as living proof that physical limitations didn't have to define quality of life. 3 months into our participation in the program, I realized that the morning at Sunset Animal Hospital had been a turning point disguised as a routine veterinary visit. The woman who'd walked into Dr. Martinez's clinic wearing paint-stained jeans and expecting nothing more than antibiotics for a rescued dog's swollen paw had discovered a pathway back to meaningful medical work that combined all of her skills and experience in service of healing that mattered. The veterans we worked with taught me things about resilience and recovery that I'd never learned in military hospitals. The animals in the program demonstrated daily that survival wasn't just about overcoming trauma, but about transforming that experience into something that could help others navigate their own healing journeys. Carmen visited the facility regularly to observe Bruno's work and to see how the program had affected both of us. "You look like yourself again," she said one afternoon as we watched Bruno lead a group therapy session for veterans dealing with mobility challenges. "Not the person you became during retirement, but the person you were during your best days in military medicine." The observation resonated because it captured something I'd been feeling but hadn't been able to articulate. Military retirement had felt like the end of meaningful work, the beginning of an extended vacation that I'd never requested and didn't know how to enjoy. But this program had revealed that retirement could be a transition to different meaningful work rather than the absence of purpose altogether. Dr. Martinez became a regular consultant to the program, providing veterinary expertise for the animal participants and serving as a bridge between the therapeutic work and ongoing medical care. "I knew that morning when I saw your database cross-reference that something important was going to happen," she said during one of her visits to the facility, "but I never imagined it would evolve into something this significant." The program's success with Bruno and me led to expansion opportunities that neither Patricia nor I had anticipated. Other facilities began requesting consultation on developing similar programs, and military medical centers started referring complex cases that required the specialized approach we developed. "We're creating something new here," Patricia said as we planned the program's expansion to include additional animals and veterans. "Combat trauma recovery enhanced by the expertise of medical professionals who understand both sides of the healing equation. This could change how military medicine approaches long-term rehabilitation." The work wasn't easy. Some days brought veteran clients whose trauma ran so deep that progress seemed impossible, animals whose behavioral challenges required patience and creativity beyond normal therapeutic approaches, and complex cases that pushed all of us to develop new techniques and understanding. But every breakthrough moment, every veteran who regained confidence through working with an animal who'd overcome similar challenges, every animal who discovered purpose in helping humans heal, reinforced the significance of the work we were doing together. Bruno thrived in his role as a therapy animal, but more than that, he'd found his calling in the same way that I had found mine. The three-legged rescue dog who'd started as my sister's project had become my partner in meaningful work that combined medical expertise with compassionate service in ways that made every day matter. The morning that had begun with skepticism at a veterinary clinic had evolved into a pathway back to meaningful medical work that combined all of her skills and experience in service of healing that mattered. The veterans we worked with taught me things about resilience and recovery that I'd never learned in military hospitals. The animals in the program demonstrated daily that survival wasn't just about overcoming trauma, but about transforming that experience into something that could help others navigate their own healing journeys. Carmen visited the facility regularly to observe Bruno's work and to see how the program had affected both of us. "You look like yourself again," she said one afternoon as we watched Bruno lead a group therapy session for veterans dealing with mobility challenges.